Great. Will the meeting of Planning and Zoning Commission for Wednesday, August 2nd, 2023, please come to order. This evening's meeting will be a virtual planning and zoning meeting hosted by Zoom. During this meeting, our procedures will be as follows. When you first enter the Zoom meeting, you'll be in a virtual waiting room until the meeting host admits you. 2, please be aware that your camera, if you have one, and your microphone will be muted by the meeting host when you enter the meeting. You can turn on your camera at any time so that you can be seen by others when and if you choose to. In order to run an efficient and orderly meeting in this virtual environment, unless stated otherwise by the meeting chairman, during the meeting host will keep everyone other than the commission members muted. You will still be able to hear everything said by the commission members, even if you are muted and or your camera is not on. There will be opportunity for public comment during public hearings, at which time public participants will be unmuted. 3, the secretary will read the call of the meeting as published according to Governor Lamont's executive order. 4, during the public hearing, the applicant will be invited to present the application, explaining to the commission and others present what is being requested. The meeting host will share all related documents on the screen as needed. In addition, all applications and supporting materials for each application on the agenda are available through the public meeting calendar page of the town website, www.guilfordct.gov, and also through the direct link on the planning and zoning page. 5, comments of town agencies will be read for each application if there are any. There will be clarifying questions from commissioners. 6, there will then be an opportunity for clarifying questions from the audience. Please raise your hand through the Zoom platform and wait to be called on and unmuted. As this public hearing must be recorded, it's necessary for speakers to identify themselves each time they speak by stating their name and address. 7, after all clarifying questions are exhausted, those who wish to speak in support of the application will be asked to come forward, state their name and address for the record, and make a statement. Then those who wish to speak in opposition to the application will ask to come forward, state their name and address for the record, and make their statement. 8, the applicant will then have an opportunity to address any questions or concerns raised by the public or commissioners. 9, once the public hearing is closed, the applicant is free to leave or remain for the balance of the public hearings and the regular meeting, during which the commission will try to reach a decision on each application. Each applicant will be notified in writing as to the decision of this commission and has a right to appeal to Superior Court if desired. 10, decisions of this meeting are available the day after the meeting by calling the Planning and Zoning Department at 203-453-8039 or by emailing planning.zoning@guilfordct.gov after 9 a.m. 11, all actions taken on applications tonight by the commission will be by roll call. All commissioners and staff will identify themselves for the record before speaking. Seated this evening are the following members who will please identify themselves. I'm not seeing Kevin Clark. Bill Freeman.
Here.
Ted Sands.
Here.
Philip Johnson.
Here.
Sean Cosgrove is not here. Frank D'Andrea.
Here.
And I am Scott Edmund, chair. Alternates tonight are Jason Marchi. And Larry Rizzola will be here. He's just running.
I think actually, given our numbers, Scott, I think Jason should probably be seated.
Yeah, Jason's going to be seated, and also Larry, once he arrives, can also be seated.
Got it.
All right, let's see here. Staff present are Steve Natick, interim town planner, Nigel Mills, assistant town planner, and Janique Morgan, administrative assistant, planning and zoning. This meeting will be recorded via the Zoom platform and made available on the town website for viewing. Typically the secretary will not read the legal notice, but I'd ask our vice chair, Frank D'Andrea, to please read the legal notice.
Sure, Scott. Legal notice, Guilford Planning and Zoning Commission. Notice is hereby given that the Guilford Planning and Zoning Commission will hold a hybrid public hearing on August 2nd, 2023 at 7:30 p.m. Attendees may join the Nathaniel B. Green Community Center via Zoom platform by using the following link. Due to limited space, members of the public wishing to attend in person are asked to register with the Planning and Zoning Department. Join the Zoom meeting at that URL. The meeting ID is 639-632-0192. You can find your local number at that https://us06web.zoom.us. The following applications will be heard. William Kern, 382 Northwood Drive, map 106, lot 70-41, zone R8 for a special permit to construct a 1,125 square foot garage. Copies of these applications are available for inspection in the Planning and Zoning Office and on the town's website. At this hearing, persons may attend via web connection and shall be heard. All written correspondence shall be submitted to the planning.zoning@guilfordct.gov 24 hours prior to the meeting day. Documents are available at the Planning and Zoning Office, dial 203-453-8039 for assistance. Dated at Guilford, Connecticut, this 11th day of July, 2023. Scott Edmund, Chairman.
Thank you very much.
Yes, sir.
All right. Do I hear a motion to open the public hearing on this today? Thank you, Philip. Do I hear a second?
Second.
All in favor, please say aye.
Aye.
Motion carries. All right, first order of business. Ryan P. and Aaron M. Connolly, 54 Water Street, map 32, lot 71, zone R3, special permit to construct a 2-car garage and accessory dwelling unit with a footprint above 750 square feet. This has been requested to be tabled to the September 6th meeting, 2023. Do I hear a motion to do so?
So moved.
Second.
Thank you. Jason Marchi,
Aye.
Ted Sands,
Aye.
Bill Freeman,
Yes.
Philip Johnson,
Yes.
Frank DeAndrea,
Yes.
and I'll vote yes. 54. All right. William Kearns, 382 Northwood Drive, map 106, lot 70-41, zone R8, special permit to construct a 1,125 square foot garage. Either Steve or Nigel or Janique, is this to be tabled or are we hearing this item today?
The applicant has requested to withdraw the application at the guidance of the town staff. I did advise the applicant to request that their fee be waived because they are planning to resubmit the application at a later date in the next few months.
Okay. So then they would provide their fee then, or we would just use the fee that they've already paid?
Yes.
Okay. Do we need to make a motion specific to that, Steve, or are we?
If you could.
Okay. Would anyone make a motion, please, to waive the application fee for 382 Northwood Drive?
I'd like to make a motion to waive the application fee for 382 Northwood Drive based on the withdrawal of the current application and the future submission of a revised application.
I will second.
Thank you. Very thorough. Second from Jason. Jason Marchi.
Aye.
Ted Sands.
Yes.
Bill Freeman.
Yes.
Philip Johnson.
Yes.
Frank DeAndrea.
Aye.
And I also vote yes. We do not have deliberation of that item. On to the regular meeting. Todd K. Anderson, Anderson Engineering and Surveying Associates, 539 Boston Street, map 49, lot 10A, zone R3, subdivision and coastal site plan to officially establish a lot as part of the Sunzoni property. Request the table until September 6th, 2023. Do I hear a motion to do so?
So moved.
Second.
Ted, Philip, you guys are on the ball today. Jason Marchi,
Yes.
Ted Sands,
Aye.
Bill Freeman,
Yes.
Philip Johnson,
Yes.
Frank DeAndrea,
Yes.
and I'll vote yes to table. All right. Next item on our regular meeting, Town of Guilford Planning and Zoning Commission application for adoption of proposed April 13th, 2023 draft zoning regulations and amended zoning map continued from July 26th, 2023. Take it away, Glenn.
Scott, quick question. Do we want to
Sure.
close? Do we want to close the public hearing?
Yeah, as soon as we move to the regular meeting, that closes the public hearing.
Got it.
Correct.
Okay. Sorry.
We can deliberate minutes if we want to real quick, but otherwise, I don't think we have any other items after this. Is that correct, Steve or Nigel?
That's it. No other business besides the minutes.
And the minutes are that we're approving is the July 19th minutes. We don't have the ones from
No, it's gonna be the July 5th.
July 5th minutes.
19th, yeah, will be followed.
Okay. Was anyone able to review the July 5th minutes? Okay.
Cricket.
Would anyone like to make a motion to approve the July 5th minutes?
I will make a motion to approve it because they look substantially correct to me.
Thank you, Frank. Second.
Second.
Thank you, Bill. Jason Marchi,
Yes.
Ted Sands,
Yes.
Bill Freeman,
Yes.
Philip Johnson,
Yes.
Frank D'Andrea,
Yes.
and I'll vote yes. All right, fine. Go for it.
Steve, Nigel, or Janique, if you could enable screen sharing, that would be great.
Doing it now.
There we go.
All right. Should be all set for you.
Yep, just a sec. There we go. Commission may recall that all of the comments that came in at the public hearing were organized into two documents, one of which was organized by section of the regulations and the other which was organized by possible action. This is the document that we used at prior meetings. We went through the first three sections, which was comments from the received at the public hearing, where changes were felt to address possible language which wasn't as clear as we would like it to be. We went through areas where no change was recommended. We talked through the discuss items, but there is a fourth category where, in my estimation, no action was necessary or suggested, or the comment had already been raised by one person, and so we didn't need to repeat the comment multiple times. What I just wanted to do is to give the commission the opportunity to make sure that you agree with the characterization that I made. And so there are comments here on pages 19, I think, through 31, where no action was identified. And if there was anything in here the commission felt that should be pulled out or discussed or included in the regulation, this would be the time to do that. So
thanks, Glenn. I just wanted to confirm for everyone too that this was, sent again to all the commissioners yesterday, and we were asked to review it prior to the meeting. So any commissioners that have things that came up when they were reviewing it, then bring it up as we go through the pages.
All right, so I'll go through page by page. Page 19, sort of some general comments, words and terms, and then residential districts and uses. Anything from any commissioners? Okay. The next page 20, continued comments on some of the residential regulations. And again, a number of these we talked about as part of our prior discussions.
There was one about the RVs. There's one about the RVs that we discussed earlier, Ted, and I think we're going to handle this after the amendment's over.
Yeah, that's correct. I got a list, I believe, of 3 items that we talked about so far that we put on our future issues list. So I will be sharing that back with the staff and with the commission as we move forward with the regulations.
Yeah.
Anything on page 20?
No.
Page 21, again, final comments on residential sections and then the business districts and uses. Any comments from the commission here? Continuing on to page 22, which again is related to business zones. Page 23. Page 24 is the end of the business zones, now special districts, and then some of the use-related provisions.
9 told Steve, is it possible to just jack up the view a little bit? It's pretty tough to read.
I'm
Thank
sorry, yes,
That's okay.
that's me, Phil. I apologize.
No. Thank you.
Now I lost track of my page number here, so.
23.
Thank you very much. All right, next page. I guess this is 24, 25. Again, this was the use-related regulations. Again, I think we talked about these before as well. That was 25. Okay, there we go. Page 26, a number of comments again related to, for example, here's 611, which we talked about quite a bit before, and perhaps we'll be talking more about this evening. Then in the standards section of the regulations, and then carrying over to page 27 in terms of special standards.
Bryson, get in bed.
And then page 28, just these were just sort of general comments not related to specific sections of the regulations, but some people commented that we needed more time to review, or they suggested the commission delay adoption of the regulations. Some people felt that the summary of changes or major changes in the regulation wasn't detailed enough in terms of things that were being modified. Some people commented that they felt the process should be paused or restarted in terms of the regulation changes that the commission is considering. Comment made about consistency with plans such as the POCD, town master plan, etc. Some comments urging the commission to move ahead and adopt the regulations. And then the last comments, just, you know, in terms of some sections or provisions that people had other comments on. Is there anything in this list that the commission feels we should spend more time talking about before we go back to some of the special topics?
You know, Glenn, when I reviewed it, nothing jumped out at me, you know.
Great. Thank you very much. So what I'd like to do now, I think, is to share with the commission the possible revisions to section 611. Now, I apologize that the numbering here, I've tried to maintain the numbering in the regulations, but it's very hard to sort of modify the first number here. So this is section 611 of the regulations. As we had discussed earlier, I felt that oh, sorry, Phil. Yeah, I apologize. Some of the language perhaps was not as clear as it could be or should be in this particular situation. And so I've proposed some edits here for the commission's discussion so that we can address some of these issues. I think just wanted to clarify some of the provisions in terms of the affordability requirements and the 12% set aside. I felt some additional language was needed with regard to a situation where somebody might wish to pay a fee in lieu of affordable housing into Guilford's Affordable Housing Trust Fund. That fund has not been established yet, but it would likely be some time before the first project was created. So the language here says a fee to the Affordable Housing Trust Fund, or in the absence of that fund, an affordable housing organization or fund acceptable to the commission. And so that could be a municipal account, but not a fund that might be created by an ordinance or some other approach. And so I think we've made provisions here. A developer cannot just propose the fee. he can suggest that was what the developer would like to do, wholly or partially. But the commission has the ability to review that and approve the payment of a fee in lieu of or not, and to get the units. I think there had been some discussion about how the fee in lieu of affordable housing would be calculated. I found information from the International Code Council, which I shared with the commission, which identifies, it's updated every 6 months. It identifies construction costs for different types of construction. And so the methodology perhaps for the commission to consider on this would be the per square foot cost identified in the building valuation data from the International Code Council times the size of the unit times 12%. So just doing the quick math here, there are certain types of construction, just to make the math easy, is $200 a square foot. If it's 1,000 square foot unit, that's $200,000, and 12% of that is a fee of $24,000 for not building the affordable unit, and that would be the deposit into the trust fund. And I think the commission should think, as part of our discussion here tonight, the 12% number is a number that I carried forward because it was what was in the current regulation and relates to the 12% set aside. And so that would be one way to get at the issue of how much is the payment or the fee in lieu of.
Looks like Bill, you've got your hand up.
Yeah, I had a question about part 2 there where it references 830G, and I just was curious, I'm not clear on the interrelatedness between what we're proposing and how it ties in with the Connecticut General Statute Section 830G.
Yeah, good point, Bill. So the issue is, in terms of 830G, it relates to the affordability requirements and the different levels of area median income and the time restriction of the development, et cetera. I think in conversations that I was part of with Jamie, the desire or interest here would be to have units count towards Guilford's affordable housing total, and ensuring that they are in accordance with 830G would help us to do that.
But it doesn't relate to the, obviously the 12% is our own part of it, and theirs is their part of it.
That's correct.
Okay, thank you very much.
Glenn, it was brought up to me that the building valuation data is just for estimated for construction costs. Have you? So then there's a concern that this doesn't really touch the land cost of building, and have you seen any of these that also touch the land cost in some way? Perhaps a percentage of the assessment or something like that?
I have not, Scott, but this is why I think that the 12% number could be something the commission might want to consider to factor in land costs and site work and general conditions, which generally are not actual construction costs themselves. They're project costs, but not necessarily construction costs. So I think the issue would be to find a number or a percentage which addresses this issue. I think the funds could be used a lot of different ways in terms of land acquisition, unit construction, enhancing projects that the housing authority may undertake, et cetera. So some of those costs may already be included or incorporated in their project, and now these funds could go to actual construction. But I think these are just really good policy decisions for the commission to consider. And I think the operative one is the square footage is what it is. I think the per square foot cost, this is an independent construction updated evaluation twice a year. So I think that would help, be an impartial source of that kind of data. And then the last issue is the estimated construction cost, and the building valuation data does not include, as you pointed out, Scott, land, general conditions, site work, et cetera. I think Bill has his hand up again. Phil does too. Yeah.
Yeah, I think that at one point we discussed that there was sort of three possibilities. You could pay the fee directly, build the units, or then subsequently take the appropriated fees and fix up another structure somewhere else and make it affordable. Was that correct?
That is correct.
That's the off-site section, right, Glenn?
Yep, that's coming up.
Yeah, I think the 12% should be based, at least my understanding of the way it is elsewhere in my world and things I've seen, is that it's based on the actual construction costs, not your land acquisition, not your site work, off-site improvements, all those different things. So I thought that we had that was settled business, but is there now another variable that is being considered?
Well, I mean, I guess the question is, if we just take 12% of the buildability of it, then would, whoever's administering the Guilford's Affordable Housing Trust Fund, will they have enough funds to do a project if they don't, if they have to find the money for GCs and land and whatnot elsewhere?
I don't think it's ever, personally, I don't think it's ever going to cover all of the variables, but I think it would relatively quickly create a fund in which, the Affordable Housing Trust could use, other people could leverage to buy land, work with people like Hope, I forget the name of the company out in Old Saybrook, stuff like that. I think it's just, I think maybe Glenn might back this up, that it's a very clean way of doing this. I think we were struggling with how to keep it, sort of by the numbers, so to speak, so there wasn't any variables on, how you built your building permit together and all those different things. Is that correct?
Yeah, I think I tried to find a way that was clear, understandable, and backed up by broad, deep data in terms of, this building valuation data from the International Code Council. So I think that allows us to check a couple of boxes, Bill. And I think the last thing, I wasn't trying to put new issues on the table for the commission, but now that we've nailed down the floor area and the cost, I just wanted to bring to the commission's attention and sort of some simple math that you would get to from that 12%. So if you felt there was some additional discussion there, I didn't want us to go past that, and we can think about that as we move forward.
Yeah, I mean, did you have any thoughts, Glenn, about that percentage number versus other numbers that you've seen in other towns?
I've seen some other towns that have gone lower than that. So I think it's really up to the commission. I know there are people on the commission with building experience. And so you would have an opportunity to sort of think about that. And our goal here, I think, is to produce units. There may be circumstances or situations where it just may not actually kind of work. So a payment of $24,000, for example, in the example I gave, might provide an opportunity to do something elsewhere to actually produce affordable units, or the commission may just generally default, with approval of the commission and say, we are reluctant to ever accept a fee. I don't know. I think we'll figure out how this works, and I think that could be adjusted or modified over time as well.
All right, Philip, you had your hand raised.
I did. I'm just curious if anybody else, feels the irony of, adding this fee to a development, which is just going to get passed along to the consumers, for affordability, when it's going to be actually create less affordability for that development. I mean, am I missing the mark on that?
Yeah, you're correct. But if the goal is to create affordable housing that otherwise wouldn't have been there, then
right. But the housing,
you do have to pass the cost off somewhere.
The housing that's being developed will now be less affordable because of the fees that we're imposing,
unless the developers decide to eat their margin.
Right. So I did a little back of the napkin calculations a while back when Jamie was around, and it equivocated to about 1 to 1.5% difference to if you increase the realtor fee from 5% to say 6 or 6.5%. So it's not on at least my opinion, on a large scale basis, it's not going to affect the viability of the developer's program, because in the past, I know when you wanted to stimulate sales in your projects, you might offer a 6% where you go 3 and 2 or 3 and 5, 3 and 3 or 4 and 2 or whatever to get velocity out of your. So I don't think it's damaging the ability for the developer to make a profit. And I think that is a good way to hopefully put some money into an account that will help Guilford's affordability quotient.
Ted, you were next with your hand raised.
All right. I'm fairly strong on this idea that we need to include something to buy the land. And my thinking on this is, if we have, if you're doing a subdivision or something like that, where we say you have to have a certain amount of open space and you can pay a fee in lieu. And what we've said is you can pay a fee that's based on the assessed valuation of the land. And to me, saying we're going to develop units when we have no money to buy the land, much less do the site prep, we're just kidding ourselves. I think what we need to do, if we're going to go with 12% and not 15 or 20, is to say that it's 12% of the construction cost. I think what Glenn has proposed is a brilliant solution to how we calculate the construction costs and how we take into account inflation, et cetera. And then I think we have to say, and 12% of the assessed valuation of the land that the project is on. Because they were either going to build the units on that land, or they're going to pay us a fee. If they don't build the units, the affordable units on the land, and they build more market rate units on the land, then they owe us the fee for the market rate substitution. And so I think it's a two-part calculation for the fee in lieu. The one is the square footage times the construction cost. And the second is the 12% times the amount of land that is being dedicated to the 12% of the assessed value of the property. And that's the total that comes up to the fee in lieu.
Glenn, let me know if I'm wrong here, but it seems like the hard part about putting a percentage on the land is that it's so variable, right? You have some lots that are worth way more versus lots that are worth way less. And how do we calculate that future of like,
but we have said that if they are going to do a unit that's on the property, it has to be essentially similar to the other units. It can't be the ones in the back or the ones in the swamp or the ones without the view or
it has to
that
be
sort of thing. It has to be equal. So yeah. I think you just take the assessed value of the land times the 12%, and that's the land cost that goes to the housing to the Affordable Housing Trust. And then you take the square footage.
But again, it's yeah,
you can't do it over the whole value of the land. You'd have to parse it out based on the 12% of the value of the land.
It's 12% of the assessed value of the land.
But I think that if I'm not mistaken, that these funds are also available for purchasing land. They're there for land infrastructure. It's proposed project. It's not just for construction of the building. Is that correct, Glenn?
I think if the purpose of the fund was to actually build units from scratch, you're correct. We would have to find land, locate land, purchase land. We'd also have to have some consideration for project costs, including site work and general conditions. So I think Ted's concept here of 12% of the assessed value keeps us out of having to get appraisals of land value and everything else. Assessed value is a lower number than assessed market value, right? Because that's 70% of the assessed value is 70% of the assessor's estimate of market value. But I think at that point in time, we've got now a framework moving forward, which is more in line with what it would cost for, let's call it a replacement unit or something else like that.
An offsite unit.
I think an offsite unit would be somebody, a developer now says, I will do this. I will take care of this. I think the fee in lieu of Ted would actually be for perhaps a situation that there's a nonprofit who we could assist with creating additional units. We could have a situation where I'm familiar with another municipality in Connecticut where the housing authority was looking to add a project or modify a project, but they were having a hard time getting the development funding. And they received money from the town's Affordable Housing Trust Fund to do the design work, get the permits and approvals and everything together to make it shovel ready. And then all that money came back when the HUD funding came through. So I think there are a lot of different ways that we could accelerate and use these dollars. It's probably going to surprise us later when we realize what some of those methods may be.
Right, because you could be updating existing housing. You could be partnering with a nonprofit who has state funding already, and you're just supplementing, or you're just providing the front end funds for them to get the state funding. It's hard. I don't think we can just assume that it's going to straight up be a 1-for-1. You're not building, so now we're going to build something.
Yeah, and I think they'll probably build some something into the process where people make proposals to the fund and get voted on by the fund managers, whoever that might be, and whether it has to go through the selectmen or the finance committee or something like that, it has to be determined. But I would prefer, if we want to get more money, to make the percentage from 12 to 15 versus trying to create another layer of calculations that we then have to deal with. Because if it's a sort of a simple, to keep it as simple as possible so that people can go look at that building valuation data and pencil it out right away on a spreadsheet, and they'll go, yeah, that'll work. That's not going to ruin things, or I can change my. It also is going to affect what kind of mix they might put in for their housing. I mean, there's all kinds of variables.
Right.
So what I'd like to suggest. Larry, you had your hand up. I'm sorry.
But Bill, I would suggest that if we use the appraised value, it's just as easy to calculate as using the construction cost.
Yeah, I don't disagree with that, Ted. The problem is that it makes a job like, Eagles Nest, for instance, extremely high fee, right. Which is, and that's a project also that would struggle with a affordable housing unit anyway, just because of how expensive each unit is. And that's, it makes the hit so much higher for some of those higher end projects.
In the same token, Scott, I think Glenn's proposal of using the building valuation data actually would help Eagles do a bit, only because it's a fixed number regardless of the type of construction.
So that's what I really like about the building valuation data, is because it doesn't matter how expensive the lot is, where it is. It doesn't matter if it's a multi-million or if it's whatever. The cost is what you expect, is the cost what you expect. So it's not that I disagree, Ted. It's more of I'm just a little wary of jumping straight into 12% of the land assessed value and seeing what happens. You know what I mean? I guess I would lean more towards what Bill suggested of, well, maybe we just do 15% of the the building data, and then see how the money works out from there. See how successful it is. But Larry, you've had your hand up. Did you have a comment?
A couple. First, I think the keep it simple, stupid principle comes into play here. It sounds, by going by the construction cost, it's easy to calculate, and it seems eminently fair because it's uniform, whatever development is, wherever it is. I wrote in a letter when a note to you all when I couldn't, wasn't sure what time I could join the meeting, of not rounding up or rounding down. Well, first, before I get to that, when I was at a hearing on the affordable housing bills before the legislature, a New Haven developer was asked, New Haven only required 5% affordable housing. And he said, well, suppose we required 10%. And he said, I could absorb the cost. I could do 10%. How about 12%? He said, well, 12% I'd have to sit down with a pencil and paper and figure it out. So I think 12% is right on that cusp, and we kind of need it. So is there a reason you need the 12% to be both the fee in lieu and the number of affordable units? And I thought it might be better than rounding percentages up or down. That if the calculation says you should build 2.3 units, you take that 0.3 and multiply it by the 12% by that calculation, and so that way you pay for that fractional amount for that unit that you can't build. The value of that approach is in one part of the document we say these rules apply to developments 2 units or more. But the way the rounding provision works, the minimum is 5 units, because below 4 units, that calculation comes out less than 0.5. There's another part where we talk about percentage of units, or numbers of units that have to be at a different category of AMI. And if you follow,
I think we'll get to that part, Larry.
Yeah, but it's the
later
same
in the discussion.
Yeah, but it's the same kind of issue that if you followed that strictly, then units 17 or lower don't. The minimum is 17 units, not 2 units. So the issues are intertwined.
So I think the rounding, Glenn, you could correct me, was more about actual units as opposed to the fee in lieu, correct?
Yeah, there's some communities that their position is that as soon as you get above a whole digit, you've now entered a scenario that if the requirement was for 6 units, then you build 6. If the requirement was for 6.1, well, they say, well, you have to do more and go to 7 units. So I think that this language was proposed by Jamie. I know she did a lot of work with the Affordable Housing Committee and others, and I just kind of carried it forward. I did have a conversation with Jamie at one time about the concept of fee in lieu for the fraction. But I think, Larry, that was an issue which received quite a bit of discussion, and the sense that I got from Jamie was that might be something that might happen at a future date, but it didn't have strong support to be included in the regulation at this time. And so I'd actually urge the commission to be cautious on that a little bit, because we didn't notice that. So that's an issue that might go onto our list for possible future consideration, but I urge you to be cautious to make that change right now, because it wasn't part of the legal notice.
So it's your suggestion that the fraction number 3 here that we're looking at pertains to both the fee in lieu as well as building units itself?
I think it does, yeah.
Okay.
So then do we need to change the language in point 1, which says any residential unit of 2 or more dwelling units has to follow these rules? But with the rounding process, it doesn't make sense because the minimum is actually 5 units. The rules apply to 5 units or more.
Yeah. So Larry, you must be a math major.
Yeah.
And the only reason
I'm a scientist. What can I tell you?
Well, no. I sort of approached it the same way. Conversation that I had with several people about this was that there may come a point in time where the decision will be made to consider applying the fee in lieu of the fraction, right? So that, and if somebody is,
so this just allows us to have the framework that covers everyone. And if it happens that you're doing 4 units and the math works out that it rounds down, rounds out, then so be it.
So yes, Scott. Like Larry, I looked at this and said, well, maybe we should just, have the numbers kind of reflect the situation. But in fact, I think this is going to be an area with considerable further discussion over the next 5 or 10 years, particularly since each town in Connecticut needs to update their plan, every affordable housing plan every 5 years. So I did try to be considerate of the future and left that text intact.
Yep.
So if we could jump back to, kind of taking people's temperature about the 12% development / the land being involved. Bill, I know you have your hand raised.
Yep.
Did you have a comment?
My experience in the real world is that what Glenn was talking about, where you hit 6.1, it really does start to fool around with your unit count and your ability to even be successful. So I think that the half measure there is a good way to sort of mitigate that fairly towards, once you get over 0.5, you're 0.6, then it goes to the higher number. And if you're below, so that I'm very much in favor of that. I found that to be excellent. And,
thanks. I'd like to hear from Jason or Frank or Phil about the fee, this fee in lieu of 12% involving land or not. Don't all jump at once.
I'm having trouble with the microphone. All right, I'm still thinking about it. So give me a second.
I think I'm more inclined to go with the assessed value, and I know that's lower than market value. But I think if you start getting into a situation where you're trying to determine a market value, it is what someone's willing to pay for it. And the one consistent thing we have is the assessed value. I do think that 12% is a high number. And I do think that, our desire to generate affordable housing is, as I said before, is going to generate a situation where these developments are less affordable. And it'll get passed along, that's just the reality of it. But
I think, Phil, that's where grants and so forth can come in to help the developer with those costs. There's other options available for the affordable housing.
But they're not going to, if they're paying the fee in lieu of, they're not going to get a grant for affordable housing.
If I'm not mistaken, I believe Ted is asking to have an additional, unless I misunderstood.
That's
I think he wants to have the 12% on the building,
on the land and the building,
and also on the assessed value of the land.
So now you're talking almost. That's a lot of money.
That's a lot of money. That's I think from my perspective, just for the last time, I like the 12% on the building valuation data.
I'm with Bill. I'm not sure I'd go at 12%, but I'm with Bill on, I don't think you tag them for both.
No. Glenn, question for Glenn: Are some municipalities doing a 15% for construction costs? Have they gone that high?
I do know there's some town. I know at least one town in Connecticut that has an 18% set aside requirement. I'm not quite sure what their approach is to fee in lieu of.
Is that a large municipality? Because we've only got 22,000 people in our town.
It's lower Fairfield County.
But does it start with G and is it on the New York border?
No.
Okay, just checking.
I feel like you're getting warm though, Phil. But I think the issue here again is that communities, that particular community has got an exemption or a moratorium, actually two, I think, from the state in terms of the production of affordable units. And they realized, again, it was a challenge. They were trying to address this issue. And I think the realization around the state is that communities just do a 10% set aside, everybody's treading water, and we're not actually making real progress. I mean, we're creating units, but we're not making progress in terms of the affordable housing appeals list, et cetera. So there is interest in higher percentages. But I do think that we have to get some experience on the ground in each municipality with this, and then we can certainly adjust it as time moves on.
Yeah, the COG described interviewed towns that started with 10%. They found that was no problem. They went to 12%, and now they're thinking about going to 15%. So they did it in an iterative way, slowly building up. David Fink, when I discussed this with him, he was in favor of the 12%, knowing what's going on in the South Central region. He thought 10% might be a little low and 12% would be kind of a sweet spot. He thought 15% might be a little too high.
So I just want to be clear, Ted, you were thinking the 12% on construction and another 12% on the assessed value of the land, right? Is that
correct?
Okay, yeah, which to me seems high. I like the 12% to 15% on the construction cost, and don't worry about the land. Again, to keep it simple.
I guess having talked through this all, Ted, I mean, do you feel like we start with this on 12, and if it becomes glaringly obvious that it's not producing enough of a result, then we can go back to it? I guess the worry is to put too much of a burden out there.
Look, if you want to start with 12 on the construction cost only and see how that works, then maybe that's an approach. But I think that in the long run, we're probably going to have either a much higher number than 12 on the construction cost, or we're going to have to take into account the land cost. But if, we're starting, and if you want to start with 12% on the construction cost only, that's a start. It's not going to get us very many units, but it's a start.
Yeah, I guess I would mention at this time too. I mean, the plan is to go back to the Affordable Housing Committee, that's not their official name, but to go back to that group. And there's, this doesn't have, none of this has incentive programs in there. None of this has a lot of other things and other tactics that we can do to try to increase affordable housing in the town. And the hope is that they can come up with some of those systems that will make it more attractive for developers to do affordable housing. That isn't just us making requirements of 12% or whatever. So the hope is that this, if they can make those, if we can come up with ways to incentivize it, then then this requirement ends up not coming into play very often, is the hope, right? So yeah, I mean, I'm comfortable with it being a 12% starting point. I think it seems like many of the commissioners are feeling the same way.
Yes.
I think I need to correct myself. David Fink was talking about 12% for the number of units and wasn't weighing in on the fee and lieu. But I agree.
Yeah, he doesn't actually like fee and lieu. He prefer us to require them to just do the units. So
just do the units, yeah.
And I think that's partly why I added the text here with approval of the commission. I think this is something, again, we should road test this, et cetera. But I think I forget, it might have been Larry or Scott who made the point. I'm now thinking that paragraph 3 should move up in front of 2. Okay.
Yeah, just to make it clear that we're talking about both.
Yeah, it seems out of place. I see it now. It seems a little out of place there.
So that would become number 2, and number 2 would be 3.
Exactly.
Okay.
Yep.
Yeah,
I agree.
That makes sense.
Yeah, this is a great starting point.
I think on the next page here, you may recall that Jamie's draft had a lot of language about the housing trust fund, the function of the overseeing group, the fact that the town might hire third-party administrators, and a lot of things which I didn't think was really in the realm of a set of zoning regulations from Planning and Zoning Commission. But I did feel that the concept of the Affordable Housing Trust Fund was important enough to just put in what, throughout the regs, we use these blue boxes, which is what it's intended to do, receive, hold, account for funding from different places to support public or private development of affordable housing. So it's just, it's not a regulation, it's just a placeholder, kind of an explanation. I wish it hadn't ended up on the top of the next page, but it was kind of hard to fit it in there with pagination, et cetera. So, Bill, I see your hands up.
Yeah, the only problem I had, not problem, but just thought I had on number 4 there was C, that they be functionally equivalent, but not identical. That certainly leaves a lot of leeway to put not such great stuff in, with respect to like kitchens and mold. And I would prefer that, honestly, I just think they should be the same. That just sort of makes everybody on the same playing field. You go to visit somebody in an affordable unit and their unit looks completely different than yours inside. That seems punitive to me.
Okay.
So you're just saying you want to leave it as functionally equivalent?
Yeah, no, just as equivalent.
Just equivalent.
Because functionally equivalent, you can get a sub-zero refrigerator, or you can get like a college refrigerator. I mean, they're equivalent functionally. They're both refrigerators, but they're not the same. So I just would like to see the fit and finish be equivalent.
Okay.
Yeah, I think Bill's got a good point. You'll notice up above here, they said unless modified by the commission. So we could say the same thing here. I mean, it might be that maybe the market rate units do have, what was the brand of fridge, Bill, that you mentioned?
Sub-zero.
Sub-zero. So they get sub-zeros and everybody else gets the top of the line Frigidaire or Bosch or something else. So it's not quite a sub-zero, but so I think what would the commission's pleasure be on the issue about interiors? Identical or?
You have to be really careful when you do identical, because fixing a sub-zero is in the thousands.
Right.
Same thing with a Wolf stove that costs you $20,000. You're probably, the upkeep on those and the maintenance.
Yeah.
You gotta watch that stuff.
That's true. Also, how do you handle like pre-sales within a multi-unit, and all of a sudden the pre-sale wants all these upgrades and stuff like that? Is that something you run into, Glenn?
Yeah, I think when I have been involved in these types of situations before, I've essentially advised the commission to require a list of finishes and appliances and other things that come with units. So if the countertop, the baseline is something, if somebody comes along and says, well, I want marble or quartzite or, formed concrete or something else, they want an upgrade, go for it, knock yourself out.
Yeah, I mean, that's kind of a good point where you have granite countertops and you have, Formica countertops. I mean, they're functionally equivalent, but they're certainly very different. Would it be, substantially equivalent or something of that nature, where you're not just saying it's just a flat counter, but it has to be, maybe there's an expensive granite and a less expensive granite or something like that.
Well, I think you could say substantially equivalent to the satisfaction of the commission.
Okay, I like that.
That works. That works.
Okay.
Yeah, I mean, I think giving us the chance to have them just deliver us with the baseline, I think would be helpful for everyone.
Right. And I think I've seen in the affordability plans that often accompanies these types of developments, these things do get specified, because the other issue that there have been scenarios over the years where an affordable unit sells and the departing family takes the appliances. It's like, no, those appliances go with the unit, because otherwise, I do think these become management issues, but I think the commission should at least be aware of these.
Yeah.
I don't think there's much to talk about here that wasn't in the regs before. Yeah, so there is the opportunity for on-site or off-site affordable housing.
Okay, great. Thank you.
Yeah, so the only thing that slightly bothers me about the off-site portion of this is you know, it feels like we want a lot more regulation on this. Like, so so they turn around and they want to build like a, you know, obviously this isn't actually going to happen, but this is what some folks might think is like, they're going to turn around and build a trailer park somewhere to offset, you know, build a whole bunch of tiny homes somewhere to offset the fact that they didn't want to build an affordable unit on their lot. How do we make sure that the off-site affordable housing is of a level that would be not equivalent, but like of, you know, reasonable, or something that the commission would be happy with, you know?
Yeah, so I think I tried to craft that language,
Wouldn't you
Scott.
just have a provision that the commission would have to approve the offsite?
Right, I guess he kind of does here, yeah.
It says that, yeah.
I think the other thing which is in the regulation, which I think is helpful too, is that the issue is that the commission can be somewhat flexible in the number and location of affordable housing units, provided that the town gets more housing unit equivalent points out of it. So this is now a situation where somebody says, well, yeah, you know, I'd like to preserve the view of Long Island Sound from my market rate units. To say, okay, we can sort of, you know, an affordable unit doesn't necessarily get a view of Long Island Sound. But the issue is now you've got to figure out a way to get us more housing unit equivalent points or something else, and again, acceptable to the commission. So I think we've tried to find ways that this is an equitable and productive approach here in terms of you know, creating units, et cetera.
That's great. I like that.
This is the point Larry raised earlier, I think today. I don't get the 17 units thing on this. I'm going to need a little explanation here from Larry.
But I mean, it is true that if you're talking about, well, because Larry is looking for at what point are you required to do 2 units, right, Larry? And then
that's right.
If you're required to do 2 units, then one of them has to be 80 and one of them has to be 60.
Oh, I see. Okay, gotcha. All right. I'm with you, Larry. Now I got it. So I like Larry's wording here. Then I think I don't have it in front of me, Larry. Or maybe I do. Oh, here we go. If a developer builds 2 or more affordable units, they must belong to at least 2 of the categories of area median income.
Right. That would correct it.
That's great. I haven't seen 40 AMI on anything.
I'm not sure too many people are going to opt for that one. But
I mean,
again,
unless they get those offset points you were talking about earlier by going lower AMI.
Yeah, fewer units, but at a lower AMI, et cetera. This is yeah, developer can make a choice based on what they think is the proper outcome or whatever.
So the only thing on this paragraph, Glenn, that I didn't like the last sentence because it just feels like it doesn't actually say anything. It just says, hey, we might change something later. And is that something that we normally say in our regs? Because it feels like it doesn't do anything.
I think that's a very good point, Scott. Again, this was crafted earlier. I'm not sure that it actually does anything. Of course, the commission has the ability in the future or at any time to adopt new regulations, et cetera. So I don't think we need to state that.
It feels like somebody's reading it and all of a sudden there's this ominous, like, we might change our minds later. And I don't think that's what we want to really have people think.
That's a good point, Scott.
Catching up here with us.
Did anybody have anything on 1? Because I had another comment on number 2 here. On number 2 here, where it talks about the release of the deed restricted, and it says something about the commission accepting a payment, but it doesn't say anything about what that payment would be in order to release them from the deed.
Yep.
So for one, to release somebody from a deed restriction, is that standard for us to take a payment in order for them to release? And for 2, if that is standard, then what's that? How do we figure out what that number payment should be?
I think this is part of the art and science of what will happen with affordable housing in the future. There's a couple of schools of thought going on here in communities around the state. The first of which is we're all seeing how hard it is to actually create affordable units. But we go through all this work to create them. densities which are somewhat different than what might normally have been the case, et cetera. And then after 40 years, which does seem to go by fairly quickly sometimes, the units are gone. And so you have to start all over again and replace those. So the concept that communities are evaluating is, would it be possible to keep those units affordable in perpetuity? And perpetuity is a long time. The economics can be challenging for affordable units. And the question becomes one of, depending on the type of units, the quality of the maintenance of the development. And so we can all imagine housing units, single family, multifamily, that go through roof repairs and replacements or repair siding or new windows, things that happen. But affordable units, the economics may not really work for that. So there may come a point in time we'll get more than 40 years out of a unit. We may get 60 or 80, but there may come a point in time that it needs new investment. And this now allows that to happen because the developer, owner, somebody else can say, listen, I got to put, 100,000 or some money into this, to bring it up to current needs or scenarios or situations. But if I'm limited in what I can sell or rent it for, it doesn't really make economic sense for me to do so. So the idea here that this phraseology here could start a conversation, and maybe it goes back to the fee in lieu payment before or whatever, and say, okay, we understand this scenario here. We maybe look at the present value of the calculation in some way, shape, or form, and come to a number. So I think it's hard today, Scott, to come up with a methodology that's going to be applicable in 40 or 80 years. But I think to have a conversation and let a proposal be made, and it may revolve around the actual condition of the unit and the degree of investment that might be necessary. And the commission may actually release with no payment if the situation is that dire. But I think having a unit just disappear without good reason or good cause was, I think, what this language is trying to avoid. So there are communities around the state considering this. I think it's worthwhile consider for the future.
But are there currently deed restricted houses that are getting close to that 40-year mark? Well, when did deed restricted units start in Guilford?
So that's a great question, Larry. So I mean, when it was Public Act 89-311 that created the Affordable Housing Appeals Procedure. So 2029 would be the end of the 40 years, I think, right? Is my math good there? I think it is. Yeah. So, but when the 830G was first created, the initial term was 20 years. Then it was increased to 30 years. And then probably with the Blue Ribbon Commission back in the early 2000s, it ended up being where it is today at 40 years. And I think, again, they recognized that the 20-year, those units were disappearing very quickly. And that was perhaps not the best approach. So it's...
I've seen other affordable housing structures that allow for some form of equity to be built by the person who has the affordable unit, so that they don't feel that they're just, sort of treading water, so to speak, in the housing market.
Well, it's supposed to scale. Aren't they structured so they scale with the market? It's just they continue to remain affordable. It's not that they're static, right?
Scott, my understanding on that, let's say you have a $500,000 fair market affordable house that when a person qualifies, they pay $250,000 for it. And I remember Matt Hoey saying something in the past. I'm not sure where he got that number, if it was part of a statute or a plan, that you would be allowed up to 2.5% annual growth per year on your equity of the $250,000 that you put in.
Right, because you still want people to, even if they're at a low AMI, you still want them to make money on their investment. Like,
yeah. All right, so I gotta throw a little dose of reality at the commission here, in a sense. The scenario you have described is allowed in Massachusetts. They do have provisions related to that. Here in Connecticut, unfortunately, it's a scenario that the math is simplistic, and it basically says at the time of sale, area median income at And if it's a for sale unit, for example, it's based on the prevailing interest rate. And so the challenge that we're actually seeing right now around the state is that if people bought an affordable unit when interest rates were 2%, and now they go to sell it to somebody else who is income qualified, but they can only get a mortgage at 5%.
Yeah, there's a big delta there.
There's a big delta there that the people who lower income, moderate income households trying to get their piece of the American dream
are going to lose money.
Are losing
on the chin.
And it's funny because the place that I saw that applied what I had just spoken about was Massachusetts.
So I think that the state's aware of this particular issue. They tried to figure out ways to address it and solve it. There's also a challenging issue related to capital improvements. I mean, if the boiler goes, right? How do we fix that? How do we allow people to get their money out? I mean, you know, these are challenges that come with these units. And I think that attention's being paid, but perhaps not quickly enough.
I mean, is it something that the state is working on, or do we have to
I think
figure
they
all
are,
that out
Scott.
ourselves?
I think that it's moving at a glacial pace. And as you know, there's a lot of other public policy issues related to affordable housing going on. And I think that we got to get these mechanics worked out so that we protect people and provide for people. So my sense of priorities might be different from the states. So yes, they're working on it, but perhaps not as quickly as I would like.
Sure. At the same time, you know, our regulations are based off of state regs, so it's not like we can invent a ton either.
Yep.
Okay.
I think there's not much else here in terms.
So
go ahead.
111D. The whole thing seemed a little vague to me upon first reading.
Yep.
So can you explain the reason for this paragraph?
Yep. So I think a classic situation might be, for example, there were times in the past in some municipalities where a subdivision road was required to have a granite curb. And so, you know, you could do concrete, you could do asphalt, there are a lot of different choices or whatever. The state adopted this statutory section 82I, which basically says the commission can do anything it wants in terms of its regulations, waive anything, if the end result is to create or produce affordable housing. So this is just here for the commission, that if somebody comes along and says, you know, I could do a better job or more job, if the commission might allow a modification to a blank standard, whatever that blank standard might be, commission can waive it. Perhaps you're aware of what, you know, is called the McKenzie decision, where the word waive in a set of zoning regulations is a red flag. You're not supposed to do that. Zoning regs are supposed to be uniform across the board. But this is actually a situation where the statutes say you can waive. And I think, again,
like setbacks, you know, side yard, all those different kinds of things.
You could, but again, those might be situations that if the setback requirement is on a side that abuts open space, and you would say, okay, well, there's not necessarily perhaps a visual harm from this, and it might provide some additional flexibility to produce a recreation area or something else.
Layout, things like that.
You could. And so this is here just to remind the commission and others that there is this possibility. It's, you know, like the movie Aladdin. This is kind of amazing cosmic power, but I would urge you to have itty bitty living space for this in terms of how creative you would get with the waiver. But if the end result is affordable housing, CGS 82I provides you with pretty much blanket protection.
Okay, so this is just based off of state statute, and that's why it's
okay.
Yep.
Okay.
Good point, Scott.
And then I think the last set of sections had to do with the choice of the administrator of the affordability plan. The affordability plan is the owner's manual for this development in terms of how we're going to calculate who's eligible, what income counts, how we're going to compute sale prices, rental rates, et cetera. I have seen situations in communities and other communities where, in fact, a builder's receptionist was the administrator of the affordability plan, has really no knowledge or experience of what's required in this. So I've added in a situation here that the applicant will propose a person or organization to administer the plan, but the commission gets to approve that person and any change in that person in the future. So we make sure that we're getting people who are qualified, experienced, and capable of doing what needs to be done. And if the developer is unable or unwilling to put together a qualified, capable, experienced person, the commission can actually require a third-party administrator to actually perform these functions. And this is the way that units go to qualified households at appropriate prices, and the units don't get lost over time because somebody forgot to do their title research on it or something else like that. So I think I beefed this section up for your consideration.
I was happy with 1 and 2. The only question I had about like 3, 4, 5, and so on, and into enforcement was, is it really the zoning enforcement officer that's the correct person to like maintain the list of who's the administrator of the affordability plan and check it and all that? Have you seen it different in terms of enforcement in other towns?
Who else would do it?
Well, I know that we are eventually, as a town, going to be creating a quote unquote affordable housing commission or reinstituting an affordable housing commission. So I don't know if there would be somewhere mixed in. I don't know. Is there any other way that people handle this, Glenn? It just seems a little outside of what they normally do.
Well, the housing, this is a special skill set. The housing authority staff is very good at this because, and nonprofit developers and others are really good at this because they have the experience and expertise to qualify income. They know the intricacies of what's eligible to be included or not included in the calculations and doing the math.
I'm not questioning the administrative part of it. Like, I'm very happy with, us having the input about who they choose as their administrator. It's just the zoning enforcement, number 3, the zoning enforcement officer has to maintain a list of names and contact information for who the administrator is for each of these lots, and has to check and make sure that that administrator is doing what they're supposed to do, so on and so forth. And it just, I guess it would fall under CEO. I don't really have another idea. It just
I don't either,
struck me.
I think that the goal, I think, for these developments is to set them up so that they function appropriately. This is set up so that the administrator is responsible for submitting an annual report to say, yes, the units are occupied by qualified people and the sale price or rental rate is appropriately calculated. Thumbs up for the commission, so you're aware that there haven't been shenanigans in the units or anything else like that. So the ZEO is the right person.
It adds a task to the ZEO that they aren't currently doing, really.
I think if it works the way I would envision it working, Scott, is that the ZEO is the recipient of these reports and would, just review it, look through it. And if there's no problems, nothing called out, we're good to go.
Okay.
I don't have anything else. I think I know what I need to do on this housing affordability. Are we good?
Good.
So I guess in general, commissioners, are we kind of happy with where this is headed? Is this something that we want to continue to have as part of the amendment going forward? It seems like a lot of it has gotten to the point where I'm pretty happy with where it's gotten to.
Me too.
I think we should go ahead.
We have to start someplace, and this is a good thing.
Great place.
Okay, great.
I just think one other thing to talk through with the commission tonight. You may recall at the last meeting, the commission asked me to put together a comparison that the commission had gone through, I think, in looking at the consolidation of business zones with regard to the comparison of the business mixed use with the existing MUC zones. I found the spreadsheet that Jamie had prepared for the commission and started to go through that. I found some things in the regulations that I felt needed to get stated. And also I wanted to bring forward for the commission's review, the purpose statements, the master plan requirements, and also the area and dimensional standards here.
Can you zoom in, please, Glenn?
Oh, thank you, Scott. Well, I wrote it, so I know what it says, but I understand that you guys would want to see it. Yes. So the MUC zones were essentially all adopted. The MUC 1 and 2 were all adopted at the same time. I think the MUC 3 was added later. The purpose statements are generally very similar in terms of the overall intention of what they're designed to permit, what they're intended to do, what they're intended to promote, and intended to be. So I think this is, again, just a backup for the commission so that you can keep all of this into context. There is a requirement for a master plan to be created. And this carries through to the new regulation as well, but in all of the MUC zones.
So so this table, I was a little confusing. So you have the check marks under MUC 1, 2, and 3. So you're saying that the proposed BMU would also require this? Is that correct?
Yeah, I apologize for that.
I was like I thought it was, but I was like, I had highlighted that as a question as well.
Yeah, no, thank you. Thank you all. And let me apologize for anybody who's listening in or whatever. The master plan requirement is in the back of the BMU zone. I think it's after the area dimensional standards. All this stuff is in there. I created this chart by going through each of the districts to create it. And I needed to go back to do and carry over the BMU. And I didn't get to that in my rush to get this together.
I just wanted to confirm that was getting carried over.
Yep. So then I put together the table of uses permitted. Played around with a couple of different ways to present this, but I think the approach that I wanted to do is to color code the types of approvals that are currently required in the different districts, so that when you see a different color in the BMU zone, that's because it's allowed by a different methodology than what is allowed in the underlying zones. So for example, there was no indication of farm-related buildings in any of the MUC zones, but should that be an issue, then they're allowed by zoning permit.
So the X's mean no, right?
There's nothing that was not permitted.
It wasn't in there.
Not included.
Okay.
Oh, was it expressly not permitted, or was it just not included?
Well, I think under the construction of the zoning regulations, if it's not expressly permitted, it's prohibited. That's the general approach for zoning. So otherwise, the zoning regulations would be a lot longer. And every time a new use came along, we'd have to modify the regulations to include a new prohibition. So this is the standard approach that most municipalities use in terms of the regulations.
Okay.
So this, the uses permitted are really here for the commission's evaluation in terms of what the BMU represents compared to the MUC zones that were there before. I couldn't get it all on one page, so it rolls over onto 2 pages. And for example, highlights the situations now where special permits are required. There are some scenarios where the wording changed slightly, but I may have identified that as sort of 2 rows in the table just to keep everything straight here for the commission.
Just to go back just a second, what's the difference between indoor and outdoor recreational facilities and then recreational facilities other than town building, gymnasiums, fitness, et cetera, et cetera? How is that different from the other statement, indoor and outdoor recreation facilities?
That's exactly what I had highlighted too.
One says site plan and the other says special permit, but I'm not seeing the distinction.
Yeah, I think this is in the regulations that are before the commission in terms of, what it says. This language comes out of your existing regulations. Okay. This phraseology was added in the new regulations. And I think what we're trying to do is to indicate that, an indoor tennis court or, a dome facility or a lot of other things could happen that way. But I do think we do end up with confusion here between these two and these.
Yeah.
So an indoor soccer facility. So I imagine the applicant would say, well, it falls into this category. All I need is site plan approval. And they might say, well, hang on a second here. That's an indoor recreation facility of some size that needs a special permit. So,
right. So do we need to add like an including like you did on some of these other ones?
I think you would, if the commission said to me, you know what, we're okay with adding indoor and outdoor recreation facilities into this category as a site plan use rather than a special permit, I'm comfortable making that change for you.
I think that I'm in favor of that.
Good catch, everybody.
Okay.
Can't put my hands on that piece of paper right now, so just make a note here. Indoor, outdoor.
Larry, are you okay with them moving that up to combine it with the other up above there?
Yeah, but I'm wondering if it should be special permit.
So,
What?
At some point in time, you guys are going to have to let me know that.
What?
I just want to hit the page 4 here really quick, which is I had a chance to also tabulate up the area location and bulk standards. And so these are the provisions for the different zoning districts in terms of the minimum lot sizes, and then the standards that were adopted in the BMU to address these particular things. I think the largest scenario, if you will, is the 200-foot front setback along Route 1, which was dropped to 50 feet, which was less than the setbacks in any of the MUC districts. But other than that, they seem to be fairly consistent throughout.
Was there a reason that it was dropped to 50 instead of 100? Were you part of that discussion with Jamie?
I think I'd have to go back, Scott, to the original draft that was created at Planometrics and shared with the town, and then Jamie picked it up. I don't recall a particular conversation on this number. It just may have been carried forward.
It seems to me it would make more sense for it to be 100, right? Like,
Yeah.
Or 75, but
175, yeah. 200, I think is too much.
oh, 200 is way too much.
so, right.
I think along Route 1, that might be, because it's so well traveled and what have you, that 175 to 100 would make more sense for Scott and Ted.
I'm not sure how the commission would like to proceed in terms of the overall conversation. Just to go back to the beginning here, the purpose statements, what originally the zones were identified for, the master plan requirement.
So part of the reason why we wanted to have this discussion, Glenn, was because we had discussed, well, do we keep the MUC 1, 2, and 3 as two separate, completely separate zones, or do we move forward with combining them and making them more succinct and it looks like there's really not, there are some items that are different in the pages 3 and 4. The last page, like we discussed, the only thing that's really all that different was the setbacks. And then Bill,
in favor of the BMU and adjusting the setback. I found some of the MC 1, 2, and 3 to have odd language in it about character type things. So I think this is much cleaner from my perspective.
Well, the character stuff, like from the first page that Glenn mentioned, like a lot of that kind of would stay, right, Glenn? Because it was consistent with all 3 of the MUCs.
Yeah, the purpose statement, I'd go back, Scott, and look at the purpose statement here.
Okay.
Yeah, I think as I'm looking at it right now, the BMU purpose statement is very similar to the current purpose statements for the MUC zones.
I guess you didn't highlight it here, but there is a question of, the maximum building size not having anything in proposed BMU versus 100,000 and all the others. Is that just because we're falling on the general standards of the town in general at that point, instead of specifying it for this zone?
I don't have specific recollection on this one either, Scott. So I'd have to go back and look at the original work that was done with George and Aaron, and then picked up by Jamie to figure out at what point in the process this approach ended up this way?
Well, let's go back to the point that the question that Scott raised, which is, are we going to end up with 3 districts or are we going to end up with 1? And we've been trying to simplify this thing. And it seems to me that having 1 standard is a much cleaner way to do this. And I also think that this idea that we're going to cap the building size at 100, no matter what, is just, I mean, it's creating all kinds of problems in terms of trying to fill space in various properties now. I think we should eliminate that, and we have to just use common sense and our sense of what we're trying to do for Guilford. Obviously, we're not going to build a 1 million square foot building on a single lot, but I mean, I think we need some flexibility here.
Where does it say 100,000 is the maximum?
On the current MUC zones, if you look at maximum building size here in the
Right,
middle,
but what about
highlighted.
the proposed BMU zone? What does that X indicate?
There's
There is no maximum.
There's no maximum.
That was, I think, talking to what Ted was saying, is that we would use, you know, if someone's trying to build I don't know, another type of store or exercise facility or an indoor soccer facility, you know, I think we would look at it on its merits of where it is, where it sits on the property and all those things. Is that what you're saying, Ted?
Yeah, that we have to look at it specifically, but I think these hard rules on size don't give us the flexibility we need and are going to bite us at some of the existing sites we have.
I mean, is there any other commissioners that have a different opinion in terms of combining these versus keeping the 3? Seems like combining them is not creating a ton of differences, except for a few areas that we can kind of
it certainly
decide.
It certainly affects the front setbacks. Those are
right. So the front setbacks, it affects the maximum building size, as we just talked about. I guess the maximum floor area, is kind of, it's 15%, 15% and 25%. One of them has 20% by special permit. So I don't know, maybe we'd want to do something where it's 15 and then any greater is by special permit, similar to what happened on the maximum building height, where it was put at 40 feet and then any greater is by special permit. But I think in general, to Ted's point, I would say, I'm in favor of, standardizing things a little bit more. That's the whole goal of what we're trying to do here. I think it feels like, Glenn, that there's some of these items, if you're going through proposed BMU, it feels like I don't know where these numbers came from, right? If you look at it right up against the MUC 1, 2, and 3, some of them make a lot of sense. Like, oh, okay, you took, lot shape, you took the 150 instead of the 200. That make,
Yep.
That I can understand where that came from. But then the front setback on Route 1, I'm like, I don't know where that 50-foot number came from, right? So is it something that you think you could go through and clean this up for the proposed BMU and give us something that makes a little more sense or has a reason for why we chose to do each of these things?
Yeah, I happy to go back and take a look at all of these. I think remember the conversation I had with the commission with Jamie, gosh, maybe it could have been a year and a half ago, if you will, about the sort of approach that was being used to consolidate some of the business zones. And I think in the area dimensional standards, the goal here was to try to avoid making existing uses non-conforming. So we tended to take the smaller standard. I think the observation here about what happened here on Route 1 is, you know, a new standard was introduced. And I'm not quite sure when that happened or why, but I can certainly go through and make the table more consistent in terms of its relationship to the MUC zones.
Yeah, I think that would be a helpful exercise just to kind of put a bow on this.
Okay.
Does anyone else have any thoughts related to this?
I just have a quick question. If Phil probably remembers, Scott, you probably remember, for the U-Haul building, that was going to be much closer to Route 1, wasn't it? And it was forced back some distance to be.
Well, so it was a non-conforming that they actually, as part of their presentation, they gave back some footage as part of like, hey, we know we want to do X, Y, and Z, but in order for you to let us do X, Y, and Z, we're offering that we're going to give back some footage. It's still non-conforming, but at least to get it closer. That was part of that discussion there.
Okay.
This, for new construction, it's just straight up, you know, whatever the setbacks are what they are.
Right. Yeah, I'm just concerned if things are too close to Route 1, it starts to ruin the nature of the town.
Sure. U-Haul is like 10 feet, 15 feet, something like that. This is, you know, 100 feet, especially if it's wooded, you stand there, you stand on Route 1, try to look through the woods and see 100 feet, you can't see anything.
Yeah, it's a pretty good distance. Yeah, okay.
I mean, 75, 100, you know, it gets the job done. I think the U-Haul thing also, if I recall the discussion, the property on the other side of Route 1 has a 0 setback.
I don't remember that part.
I don't remember that at all. 0?
That's the used car lot. And he puts the cars right up to the road.
Yeah, that was part of this.
I don't think placing the vehicles there, you know, goes toward your setback. We're talking about the buildings themselves.
Yeah, like the footings, right?
This is setback, not including just buildings, but also like actual parking.
Yeah.
Correct, Glenn? That's what we're talking about here.
Yeah. Although
this is full on setback of anything built.
Except the MUC 1 does contain the notation that it's a 200-foot setback, which applies to both buildings and parking areas. So that is a little unique and different. That's not.
Oh, so that's not standard for the rest of the town.
Correct.
Oh, okay. I mean, yeah. I mean, we'd still would have to.
So I think if the commission is comfortable, I think what I am prepared to do is to take all of your feedback on the make changes. I think there were a couple of no changes that we did make some modifications to, our work on discuss, create a red line set of regulations now, which would reflect changes from the version that went to public hearing. So it would come back to you roughly, I'm just going to say a week from tonight, which would be about August 9th or so. And again, it would be a red line of the changes that we have talked about. So the commission doesn't have to read all 300 something pages. You can just flip through, get to the pages with the changes on them, and decide whether or not those modifications based on your guidance to me are acceptable or not. So I will go ahead and do that and incorporate our conversation here tonight on section 611 and here on section, I think it's 4.5. How does that sound for a basic plan moving forward? That would give the commission about a week to look through that set of regulations before our meeting on August 16th.
Sounds good to me.
Good to go.
Okay.
Thank you very much.
Anything else, Glenn, that you needed us to go over for this?
No, I do want to commend the commission. I think great feedback here in terms of the regulations, et cetera. So I think I have clear direction of what needs to happen. I'll put it together and look forward to seeing you on the 16th.
Fantastic.
Thank you.
Thank you.
All right. So Steve, Nigel, Jernique, I think we don't have anything else on the agenda that we need to go over.
No.
If so, then I would entertain a motion to adjourn.
Second.
Moved.
Hi,
So
Jack.
second before the motion.
All right. All in favor, please say aye.
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 Thanks, everyone.
I'm sorry, Scott. I didn't get who was first and second. Who did you pick?
So Frank made the motion and Bill got the second.
In our order.
In an awkward way, yes. All right. All
Thanks, guys.
motion approved. Thank you all.
Thank
Good
you.
night.